It's a beautiful day here in Playa del Rey, and we are at the Southern California gas facility where they actually store compressed natural gas, CNG, underground in an abandoned oil field. And this is Eric Noble from CARLAB, and he's been working on some CNG products, and he's going to tell us a little bit about those. Eric, tell us what we're standing in front of right now.
We are standing in front of General Motors' Lambda platform, in this case in the form of a GMC Acadia Denali trim level. And this is what we would call a bi-fuel natural gas gasoline vehicle. I almost said hybrid, but hybrids, and we think of electric, but really this is a vehicle that will run on both fuels.
And how does it run on both fuels?
It's pretty straightforward. The idea here is that natural gas is so cheap and so plentiful and so domestic and so in most of our houses. And if we could save $2 a gallon by filling at home at night, we might just fill 3 or 4 gallons worth in a small tank, maybe a little bit bigger than a scuba tank, and have that hidden away in the vehicle. And if we drove 40 or 50 miles a day, we'd mostly burn the CNG. And if we decided we wanted to go for a vacation to Orlando or go to Burning Man or something else that required great range, we'd tap into the gasoline tank that's completely intact and on board anyhow. So that's the rough idea. Burn CNG when you can, and when you can't, use a little gasoline. It's okay.
So this is talking about the same gas that runs my dryer. I mean, in Southern California, we have gas dryers, and then, of course, my stovetop, and then...
And your heater, and
right.
all that stuff it's been doing safely in our homes for years. What we really want to do is allow consumers to have the choice of powering their vehicle with it as well.
And what kind of price would this add on to the car? Because that's always something that people want to know.
Yeah, people want it to pay back, right? How much extra is it going to cost? In low volume production, something like this might add maybe $3,000 to the price of the vehicle. So if we had a vehicle like this, and I'm not quoting General Motors, but if roughly a consumer might pay $38,000 for a utility vehicle like this, it might add $3,000 to that price. But based on fuel savings, a normal consumer would probably get payback on that in a little over 2 years.
So for electric cars or other alternative fuel cars, how does that compare?
Every consumer is different, all right? There's the polite answer. The reality is the only vehicles currently in market with a payback that's that good are the Toyota Prius. And that's not a surprise, right? This is why the Prius is the best-selling, well, it's the best-selling alt-fuel. If you call it alt-fuel, it really burns just gasoline. But if we broadly called Prius an alt-fuel vehicle, it's the best-selling alt-fuel vehicle in the world. In fact, Prius is, in the last couple of years, one of the top 10 best-selling vehicles in the world. And which really means consumers just vote for good payback, don't they, right? Wow, I pay a few $1,000s more, it'll save me money, and 2-3 years I'm making money. That's a great thing, right? So Prius has done that. Our idea here was, it's simple, let's just do that with natural gas.
How much is, say, a gallon of natural gas then?
Again, the utilities sell it to us in our homes, and the prices vary all over the country, but somewhere between 80 cents and maybe $1.20 a gallon, which is substantially cheaper than gasoline, right?
All I know is I write a check every month to pay my bill.
Yeah, and the check that you wrote would increase, but it would increase a lot less than the money you'd save by not stopping at the gas station as often.
Right, that makes sense.
That's the point.
Well, do you want to show us a little bit inside what makes this different?
Sure, and the whole point is that there's not a lot that's different, but let's look at a few things,
Okay.
right? So no changes in the front, right? The same grille and badge that we love.
So this looks like a normal 3-row spacious Acadia. Tell me what's different now.
You know, nothing. It's a normal 3-row spacious Acadia. So the seats are up right now. It's the same. Everything you're looking at is what a manufacturer would call A surface. A surfaces are the surfaces the customer can see and touch, and the A surfaces here are all from General Motors. So this plastic panel is the General Motors plastic panel. This is their nice carpet. These are their seat backs. This is the headline. In other words, nothing's different, right? There's no Where's Waldo at all. You know, the seats still fold down normally if you choose to do that for cargo. There's still a 3rd row. Beneath all of this A surface, there is a small change, which we'll look at in a minute, and it's basically in the form of a slightly overgrown scuba tank that lives where the spare tire used to and provides our CNG.
And you say scuba tank, so that's where the compressed gas comes in, right?
Yeah, the technology is not a mystery, right? I mean, there's no breakthrough here. The scuba tanks, the tanks that the clown shows up at our 6-year-old's birthday party with to blow up balloons, the tanks that roofers use to power their nail guns, fire extinguishers, these are all gas cylinders, right? They're common all over the world. The technology is really well known. We've got one back here that's a few gallons worth of natural gas, and the idea was to not impact the cargo area, not impact the seating, just load it beneath the floor, keep the departure angle the same, the ground clearance the same, but replace the spare, because at least our thinking was most people are going to call AAA anyhow.
Right. Well, so we don't generally get to see our gas tanks on our cars.
No, we don't want you to see the gas
But
tank.
can we see this one just for this video?
Only if you promise not to do a how-to. You know, if you looked at it, it's just an industrial, gas cylinder. 3,600 psi, nothing trick. It doesn't rely on future nanotechnology. It's not going to take Moore's law, times 10 to reduce the cost. It's here now, and available from most industrial supply places. What has been done here is this has been placed effectively outside the vehicle. So we've accessed it here. A consumer never would, but we've accessed it beneath the load floor. So this is the normal carpet panel. We've got an additional panel installed here to keep it sealed. But if a service technician at a dealership needed to service it, that's how the tank would be serviced. So very simply. But this seals, right? And just vents to the outside. So if the tank were to leak, just like a gasoline tank might, it leaks to the outside of the vehicle, right? Otherwise, it's a sealed system. It's all very heavily over-engineered. The tanks are tested to at least 2x the pressures they get run at. The tanks do, after some years, have to be recertified, but that's really easy extraction in this case. And very importantly, for FMVSS, which is Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, there's what's called a rear offset impact standard. In other words, a vehicle gets hit at basically 60%, not completely aligned. We don't call it a full rear, it's an offset rear. And in that collision, the fuel system has to stay intact, in other words, not become a danger. All these vehicles were engineered to FMVSS. I think it's FMVSS 301. And in this case, the tank moves down and out of the way in an impact in the same way that an engine would.
So it drops down beneath.
Or they, on a couple of the vehicles, they move up and out of the way. But in a front end collision, an engine is a solid. And so we want to take it out of the equation. In a rear collision, in this case, a natural gas tank is a solid. It's fine. We just need to move it out of the way. The tank is effectively almost impenetrable, right? So we just needed to get out of the equation in a collision. In this case, it's meant to go down and out, just like an engine would. So in reality, it's a very simple installation. And as we stated, from the underside of the vehicle, we don't see anything different at all, and that's the whole point, right? You don't want it dragging when you go on a fire road to your campsite, right, for the first time. It's the same approach angle, it's the same departure angle that the Acadia had stock. Weight-wise, this is pretty similar to the weight of the spare tire that it replaced. EPA weight classification, test weight we call it, for the vehicle, doesn't change at all.
So if this were just running on the CNG, then the cost is going to be very low because the CNG is so inexpensive. But if you were going on the road trip where you would use both your gas and your CNG...
the trip to Disney World.
Yeah, how many miles are you going to go?
Well, look, the system in reality is using a little bit of gasoline even while it runs mostly on CNG. But let's say you might go 40 to 80 miles on mostly CNG. At which point you'd feel nothing, and the vehicle would just quietly switch completely to gasoline, and it would run the rest of the trip on gasoline. So if this vehicle has a 20-gallon tank, and the range is therefore somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 miles on gasoline, that range is additive to the maybe 80-mile CNG range. So really, in a case like this, we've taken the range of this vehicle from, say, about 400 miles to about 500, perhaps.
And then how long does it take to refill this tank?
It depends on the refill unit, but I think if you talk to, there's a few companies that have already publicly announced they're they're exploring the home refill market, and I think the targets are somewhere along the lines of about 1 gas gallon equivalent, or 1 gallon per hour. So in this case, the tank might, mostly drained, this tank might go down to oh, I don't know, needing 3.5 gallons. So it'd take about 3.5 hours.
That's not bad at all.
No, it's not bad at all. And the thing is, in cases where it is bad, you came home and realized you didn't pick up the dry cleaning, it's Friday night, the wedding's tomorrow, you've got to have it, and it closes in 15 minutes. If you're out of CNG, it's okay. You still have gasoline on board. You can refill when you come home, or not. You're in a big hurry and you don't want to deal with it, it's okay. You can run gasoline tomorrow. It'll cost you more money, but you can run gasoline. So there isn't really a penalty, a range penalty at all, and therefore there shouldn't be any range anxiety, other than when you start moving outside of CNG range, it's going to cost more per mile, and that's gasoline. But we're paying for the convenience in that case, right? If you want to take the family to Orlando, and that's a 3-day drive, it's fine. If you want to hit a CNG station or two along the way that are convenient, super. But if you need to stop at the truck stop because 2 kids need to go potty, and dad wants an auto trader and mom wants a Vanity Fair, right? You can do it. And it's a fine place to fill up. You can do the whole trip on gasoline if you wanted.
Awesome. So this vehicle is one of several that you guys have been working on just for testing purposes.
That's right. These might be called demonstration vehicles. And the idea was to test the idea. Can we do this? I mean, we know all the parts exist. We know the technology all exists. In other words, this stuff's all in the pantry. But that doesn't mean the recipe is going to turn out, right? So we wanted to bake a couple, to make a couple sheets of these cookies to see how they taste. And so that's what these are about. And the reality is they're pretty scrumptious. So, now I think the vehicles are going to go on a 1-year tour. That's the intention. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe some Congress people got handed the keys, maybe some state representatives, maybe some people from EPA, DOT. Why not?
And which cars have you converted so far?
Out here today, we have 6 vehicles. All those 6 vehicles are from major segments, right? We wanted consumers to look at cars they buy, right? Not cars that some green person hopes someone would want, right? So this is a GMC Acadia, which we call a large CUV. We've got a Ford Mustang, V8, sort of a rompin' stompin' thing. GT package with Brembo brakes and all of that. That's what we call a sporty car, so we've got one of those. We've got a Hyundai Sonata, one of the best-selling mid-sized cars, probably the biggest segment in North America, almost 2.5 million units a year. So we've got a Hyundai Sonata. There's a Chrysler 300, right? America's large car, the sort of sweetheart of those that want that space and that look, right? It's a favorite. We've got a BMW X3, which is an entry luxe SUV, and the important thing to note is all 6 of them made right here in America.